Get your spatulas out because Miami just landed another flip. A big-time playmaker for the tight end room. From the 630 to the 305. Gavin Mueller, welcome to the U.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Not to mention breaking news tonight on Miami's new college football playoff position. Canes continue to move up. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and host of Postgame on the Hurricanes Radio Network. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. So on this loaded episode, we'll talk about the updated college football playoff position. What does it mean now that Miami has moved up to 13? What has to happen for the Canes to get into that college football playoff? Also, Miami is going to be linked to a possible big-name quarterback in the transfer portal, and it's not Lenore Sellers. It's not C.J. Bailey. There's another one who might be hitting that portal come January. Well, let's talk about the newest Miami Hurricanes recruiting commitment. So starting shortly after, Miami beat NC State in dominant fashion at Hard Rock Stadium this past weekend, you started to get the crystal balls coming in for an important visitor, and that is now former Colorado committed, now decommitted, 4-star tight end Gavin Mueller. Now, Mueller, after getting those crystal ball predictions and those trends, had a really good visit to Miami over the weekend. He makes his verbal commitment official on Tuesday night. He is flipping from Coach Prime and Colorado. The Buffs are having a really difficult season this year, to the Miami Hurricanes. Chalk one up for the good guys, as Mueller, who, by the way, is the #1 player in the state of Illinois. This is a 4-star tight end. He's the 4th-rated tight end in the country. 6'5", 257 pounds. And the dimension that I think is most intriguing about this guy, in addition to his impressive height and stature, he's got a 6'11" wingspan, Mueller. And something that really jumps off on the film about him, I've been trying to read up, watch up, and study up on Mueller in recent days. His ability to get contested grabs. He runs very, very well. He's quick for his size. He runs like a gazelle with the long strides. He's versatile. His high school team, South Elgin in Wheaton, Illinois, they line him up everywhere. He plays a lot of different positions in high school. We'll talk about that, including some quarterback and wildcat quarterback, but the tight end position is where he projects at Miami. Known as an absolute workhorse. He lives in the film room. He lives in the weight room, outworks everybody on his team. And here's the amazing thing, and I did not know this about Mueller until I was notified this evening shortly before and after his commitment. Because, again, I watched some of his senior film, which is super impressive. We'll talk about the stats. I didn't know that this young man has only been playing football for 2 years. So that tells you a couple things. When you've only been playing this sport now for 2 years, because most of the guys who end up being 4-star recruits by the time they're seniors in high school have probably been playing since Pop Warner, Pee Wee football, since they were barely 3 feet tall, right? This young man picks it up when he's 16, 17 years old. So it tells you he's a very fast riser, and he's really athletic and gifted to be able to pick up football at such a high level so quickly. But it also tells you he's nowhere near reaching his ceiling yet. When you talk about a guy who picks up football this quickly, he's only 2 years into his American football journey, that he still has a lot of room to grow. And so a little bit more about this player, Gavin Mueller. So, okay, in high school, he has played tight end. He's also played quarterback, running back, linebacker. So he's played at least 4 different positions. He's a versatile tight end who can also play fullback in situations, but tight end is the major position. You could also play offensive tackle if needed. There's different ways to line him up. He has been named for his high school team and district the Conference Offensive Player of the Year this year. Listen to these stats. And again, he's the number 1 player in the entire state of Illinois, all right? He's got 30 touchdowns, 1,325 receiving yards. He averages 14.8 yards per touch. And in one of his games this year, he scored 6 touchdowns in a single game. And again, this is just his second year playing football. I think Miami is really excited to pair him up with Israel Briggs. It's another 4-star tight end that Miami has committed. We call this place Tight End U for a reason, because Miami loves to bring in, talented, athletic tight ends, and they like to bring in 2 in a class if they can. In fact, just last year, class 2025, Miami brought in 2 tight ends in that class, Brock Schott and Luka Gilbert, who both have really exciting futures, and you're going to be able to add players like Israel Briggs and now Gavin Mueller into that mix. And I think Miami is excited to pair these 2 together. All right, so I mentioned he's a former Colorado Buffaloes commit. He was committed to Colorado since May, so he just decommits now in mid-November. And in decommitting from Colorado, flipping to Miami, he chooses Miami over, obviously, Colorado, but also chooses Miami over the likes of Alabama, LSU, and North Carolina. And I'm sure that there were others in the mix there. So this is an exciting player. And in adding Gavin Mueller to this class of 2026, Miami's now got 30 verbal commits. Now, there is a chance that, between now and National Signing Day, which is a little over 2 weeks away now, you may lose a player or 2 from the current class, but you're also potentially going to gain another player or 2 through flips. So I do think the class is going to end up being around 30, 31 even. And I don't think that's an issue. You remember, years ago, they used to cap off a recruiting class at 25. That's no longer the case. There's no longer a cap on it. And also remember, this season it started, the scholarship limits are up to 105. It used to be 85. Now you have 20 extra players, up to 20 extra players on scholarship. So it's not an issue if Miami takes 30 plus in this class. They're going to have room. And remember, Miami's going to be losing a big chunk of players to graduation and to the NFL. You're going to have some juniors leaving early. So you're going to be able to take in 30 plus in this recruiting class without an issue. Speaking of that recruiting class, so the On3 Rivals industry ranking has Miami at number 10 with their 30 verbal commits. Hurricanes at number 10 are just in front of number 11, LSU, number 12, Michigan, 13, Florida, 14, Florida State, 15, Clemson, and Miami is behind number 9, Tennessee, 8, Texas, 7, Texas A&M, Ohio State at 6, Alabama at 5, Notre Dame at 4, Oregon at 3, Georgia number 2, and USC with the number 1 class. So Miami is top 10 in the On3 Rivals industry ranking. Miami somehow is back at number 11 in the 24/7. For what that's worth, Miami is a spot behind Michigan at number 11. Michigan in the top 10 in the 24/7, but number 12 in the On3. But worst case scenario, Miami has the 11th rated class in the country right now. Top 10, depending on which site you look at. So Miami's doing a nice job on the trail. And Gavin Mueller is a welcomed addition. And if you haven't checked out his highlights and his huddle reel, I encourage you to do so because, again, this guy does a lot of different things on offense. But if you see just how solid, how sturdy, how athletic, how well he runs, how well he grabs contested balls, you're going to be impressed at what this guy can add at tight end. All right. We're going to have a big picture conversation when we come back because Miami did move up a couple spots in the college football playoff ranking. Could have been even better than that had Oklahoma lost last weekend. They didn't. So does Miami have a chance at number 13 with 2 games left to play? What's it going to take for the Canes to climb into the college football playoff? We'll talk about that and so much more when we come back. You want to keep it right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Guys, the NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on that action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you just want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. So right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and I will have a new episode tomorrow. We'll break down these college football playoff rankings and what it means for Miami and other teams from the ACC. Locked On ACC is available free wherever you get your podcasts and free on YouTube. All right, we had the unveiling earlier tonight. And as you see with the Miami Hurricanes, now ranked number 13 in the CFP ranking. So a couple significant points about that. Miami moves up 2 spots. They were number 15 last week. And in moving up those 2 spots, the most significant thing about that to me is 2 weeks in a row, College Football Playoff Committee has shown you that they are willing to leapfrog Miami over teams, even if those other teams don't pick up any new losses, which should be encouraging, right? Because you could say, well, if Miami's 13, what if Utah keeps winning and BYU keeps winning? There's zero chance to jump over them. Not necessarily, right? Last week, Miami leapfrogged an idle Georgia Tech. Now, Georgia Tech had lost the week before, but Miami leapfrogged them after no new Georgia Tech losses, which I thought was significant then. Now, Vanderbilt, they were off last week. Didn't pick up any new losses, Vandy, on the bye week, and Miami leapfrogs Vanderbilt. Now, as we know, Vanderbilt doesn't really have any impressive wins. They and Miami are both 8-2. Miami's win over Notre Dame is more significant than any game that Vanderbilt has won. Vanderbilt's best win is over Mizzou, who is ranked number 22, but Vanderbilt faced them when their starting quarterback was out. So that wasn't, that great of a win for Vandy. So the committee is willing to leapfrog Miami over Vanderbilt despite no new Vandy losses, which I do find to be significant. However, as we all know, if you finish the season at number 13, it's not good enough. If you finish the season at number 12 or number 11, probably also not good enough. Why is that not good enough? Because when you factor in Miami's probably not going to be the ACC champion because it would take a minor miracle to get into the ACC title game. Whoever does win the ACC probably leapfrogs you. And whoever is the top-ranked group of 5 team at the end of the season, it's currently Tulane, but it could end up being Navy. It could end up being JMU. Group of 5 highest-ranked conference champion is going to get an automatic bid. So likely Miami would need to finish the season in the top 10 in order to actually get into the field of 12 because of those extra automatic bids that come into play. So then the question becomes, is there any opportunity, even if all 3 teams keep winning, to jump ahead of the likes of Utah and BYU? You look at Alabama at number 10. Now, with them losing to Oklahoma, that puts them in a more fragile position where Bama cannot afford to lose again. And the best opportunity for that to happen would be in the Iron Bowl in the final week of the season. Now, Vanderbilt is a lot better than, Alabama is a lot better than Auburn. We know that, but we also know in the Iron Bowl, crazy things have happened. And sometimes Auburn wins that game when they have no business winning that game. So, Bama losing in the Iron Bowl would be massive, right? Notre Dame sitting at number 9. A couple notes on that. Don't expect them to lose again. Their remaining 2 games are against Stanford and Syracuse. And Syracuse, who's a terrible football team anyway, is going to take that game against Notre Dame even less seriously than they took it against Miami, because I think they're going back to either the lacrosse player at quarterback or their true freshman who still has, enough eligibility to save his red shirt. So, like, they're not even going to try. And by the way, at this point of the season, nobody's trying against Notre Dame anymore. Pittsburgh wanted to lose that game by 100 to them because they only care about their conference games. And same thing with Navy. They're trying to win their conference. So, no, and even, like, let me be clear on this. Even if Stanford and Syracuse gave it their best, they're not beating Notre Dame. Notre Dame is probably blowing out both of those teams. So ND is not going to lose again. But here's something you have to wonder, folks. If Miami can move up 2 spots in the next 2 weeks, which I think it's possible, it's feasible. If you can get within 2 spots of Notre Dame, the committee has admitted that if you're in a cluster of 3, if Notre Dame was ranked number 9 and Miami was ranked number 11, the committee would then be forced by their own logic to factor in the head-to-head. So that's the scenario you have to be praying for, right? Because this is now the 3rd college football playoff ranking, and in these past 3 weeks, the committee has not seen Miami as being close enough with Notre Dame. Notre Dame has rattled off 8 straight wins since they lost the head-to-head with Miami, and Miami's had a couple of poor showings since that time. So the committee has had Miami and ND separated by so many spots that they're not weighing the head-to-head, right? But if Miami can close that gap to be within 2 spots of Notre Dame, the committee, by their own logic, should then elevate Miami in front of Notre Dame because of the head-to-head win. So that's what you need to see. And the good news on this is, Virginia Tech is not a needle mover. Miami should blow them out, and in blowing them out, that's probably not going to really close the gap. Pittsburgh, though, beating Pittsburgh in dominant fashion, if Miami can do that. Again, none of this makes sense if Miami doesn't win out. They have to win out. But if you dominate Pittsburgh, you're probably going to move up a couple of extra spots, whereas Notre Dame having so many easy games, just 2, walk in the parks remaining, 9 is their ceiling, right? I don't see, unless Oklahoma were to lose, which would benefit Miami as well, or Oregon, which would also benefit Miami potentially. Notre Dame is probably not going to move up from number 9. So if Miami can move up a couple of spots, then the committee would be forced to factor in the head-to-head. Oklahoma's remaining schedule, though, they've got number 22 Mizzou at home. Could be a tricky game. OU should win that game. And then they wrap up the season at home against LSU. LSU obviously is in disarray, fired their coach and all that. So Oklahoma's probably going to win out, okay? You're also looking at BYU and Utah. BYU, they've got a tricky game this weekend. They're at Cincinnati. That's a game that they could lose if they're not careful. Their game after that is at home against UCF. That should be very easy. Whereas Utah has Kansas State and Kansas. What would be interesting, though, is like if Utah, so BYU is more likely to lose than Utah. But if BYU were to lose to Cincinnati, I don't know what the committee's going to do with that, because then BYU would then have the same number of losses as Utah, but then they would also have a head-to-head win over Utah. So unless the committee were to drop them again 3 or 4 spots behind Utah, then they could ignore the head-to-head. But if they're just 1 or 2 spots behind Utah, they would honor the head-to-head. And then does the committee keep both BYU and Utah in at the expense of Miami? It gets very complicated. But the only thing that Miami can control the rest of the way is winning your next 2 games, and preferably dominating, because it does sound like the committee has taken notice of how good the Hurricanes have been the last 2 weeks. A brilliant offensive performance against NC State, not to mention Miami's defense continues to look college football playoff level. They've looked CFP level on defense all season long. The committee has wanted to see more offensive consistency, and the Hurricanes are actually looking like a threatening offensive team the last couple of weeks. So all Miami can do is continue to win, finish the season 10-2. You give yourself a puncher's chance, okay? An interesting game that's coming up is number 15 USC against number 7 Oregon. I can talk myself into thinking either outcome is bad there, and here's the reason why. A lot of people think that if USC beats number 7 Oregon, that would actually be good for Miami, because Oregon, then, if they suffer their second loss to USC, they don't have any good wins then. So some folks, and they even said this on the CFP unveiling on ESPN, that if Oregon loses to USC, they may drop out of the field. I'm not convinced that would happen. Like, I'm not convinced they would actually drop from 7 out of the top 12 if they were to lose to USC. So my concern would be USC beats Oregon and then USC leapfrogs Miami because that's a great win, and Oregon doesn't fall far enough to be behind Miami. So I would actually be worried that a USC victory would hurt Miami. So I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe if Oregon blows USC out, then it keeps USC from being a threat to Miami, but then Miami doesn't move up. So maybe it is better if USC wins that game, but it's like it's hard for me to imagine the committee would drop Oregon that far out if number 15 USC beats them. But somebody's got to win that game. So we will see what happens. And then, of course, your CFP top 10 is Ohio State first, Indiana second, Texas A&M stays at third. They had a massive comeback. They nearly suffered a disaster to South Carolina. They would still be in the playoff field even if they lost that game, but they remain undefeated. Georgia at 4, Texas Tech at 5, Ole Miss at 6, Oregon 7, Oklahoma 8, Notre Dame 9, Bama 10, BYU 11, Utah 12, Miami 13, Vandy 14, USC, Georgia Tech 16, Texas 17, Michigan, Virginia at 19, Tennessee, Illinois 21, Mizzou 22, Houston 23, Tulane 24, and Arizona State 25. Speaking of Arizona State, something that made the news today. So Pete Nakos from On3.com posted a story about Arizona State quarterback Sam Leavitt is likely to leave Arizona State and hit the transfer portal come January. Now, where it gets interesting is in that story, Nakos talks about how, Sam Leavitt's older brother is his agent and that they're going to want to explore other opportunities from Arizona State. And then Leavitt's brother, the agent, came out and bashed Nakos like, hey, I told you shouldn't publish that story, that we haven't decided we're going to leave. So like Leavitt's brother is publicly making it out to be either premature news or fake news. But if we do believe this reporting, and Nakos is good at his job. I know he rubs some people the wrong way and stuff, but he's right more than he's wrong. I'll say that. If we believe this, that Sam Leavitt, the signal caller at Arizona State, is going to hit the transfer portal, this is absolutely one that I would expect Miami to look at. And we've talked in recent weeks, and it's a big-time debate among Miami fans. Do you want to go into the portal again? Should we just try to trust and develop the players we've recruited the last couple of years? Bottom line, in my opinion, if an option this good is out there, I think the Hurricanes would give it a shot. I don't think they're just going to go into the portal to bring in anybody. But if you've got an option, if Sam Leavitt does become available, there's no guarantee he chooses Miami because, a team like Indiana is also going to be looking for a transfer quarterback. And Fernando Mendoza had a pretty good season there. So, I mean, maybe, there's other teams that could come into play here. But we know Miami, the Cam Ward thing was tremendous. And Carson Beck has a chance to finish a strong season at the U. So Miami has done well with quarterbacks in the transfer portal. I'm sure Leavitt would consider Miami if he does hit the portal. And the thing, if you haven't watched this guy play because he's out on the West Coast, I think the juice would be worth the squeeze on this one. Leavitt he's a competitor. He's a successful passer. He's also a dual threat guy. So he's been injured and banged up this year. 2024 was his best season. Completed 62% of his passes, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, ran for 443 yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. This season, he's got 306 yards, 5 rushing TDs this year. Passing numbers are down a little bit this season, 10 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, but Sam Leavitt is a stud. Like, if this guy becomes available, then you would imagine teams like Miami, Indiana, some other big programs would certainly look in his direction. So, you just said, was the brother mad at the story coming out just because, they weren't ready for that to go public yet? They don't want to put Arizona State in a tough spot for a team that has a chance at a playoff bid this year? Or, is this going to end up being true and he does hit the portal? But this is, you guys can go back and watch some conversations we had on Locked On Canes a year ago at this time. And I said it then, if Leavitt had hit the portal last year, that's a guy that I would have wanted Miami to take a look at. So if he hits the portal this year, same conversation. All right, we appreciate everybody making Locked On Canes your first listen. Let me know in the comments below. At number 13, does Miami, are they within striking range in your mind? 13 now? Do you think Miami is going to end up in the college football playoff if they keep winning? Before I end the show, I should bring this up. It's going to be tough, but Miami's not completely out of the ACC championship conversation. And we all know if you can win the ACC, that's your best path to the playoff because you get an automatic bid. Here's what Miami needs to happen to reach the ACC championship game. There's a lot of moving parts here, folks, but let's go over this. CBSSports.com, by the way, put this out there in plain English, all right? For Miami to reach the ACC championship game, they need to, of course, beat Virginia Tech and Pitt. You've got to win out. Virginia needs to beat Virginia Tech. Pitt would need to beat Georgia Tech. Duke needs to beat North Carolina. SMU needs to beat Louisville. Cal needs to beat SMU. And Wake Forest needs to beat Duke. Because in this scenario, according to CBS Sports, Virginia and Miami would then go to Charlotte in a 4-way tiebreaker advantage over Georgia Tech, Pitt, and SMU. So my mind is trying to comprehend that. But the bottom line is you picture Lloyd Christmas in Dumb and Dumber. So you're telling me there's a chance. Yeah, there is a chance. And, if we can avoid all of this awkward, at-large nonsense if Miami can, sneak into that ACC championship game. And if they can, they would be favored against Virginia in an ACC championship game. That would be the way to take the committee biases and logic out of it. So we'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first or your second listen tonight. Make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and we'll talk to you again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Number one, and your team every day.